The scream that tore through the dusty streets of Genoa, Nevada, that scorching afternoon in July of 1872, was unlike anything Logan Pierce had heard in his 26 years of living. A sound so raw and desperate, it made his blood run cold even under the blistering sun. He had been leading his mare toward the livery stable after 3 weeks of driving cattle from California when the sound reached his ears, and something in that cry made him drop the reins and run toward its source without a second thought. Behind the general store, he found her collapsed on her knees in the dirt, her dark traveling dress pooling around her as she frantically dug through the dust with bare hands that were already scraped raw and bleeding. Her auburn hair had come loose from its pins and hung in wild waves around her face, and even from behind, Logan could see her entire body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her soul. "Madam," he called out, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. "Madam, are you hurt?" She didn't seem to hear him, just kept clawing at the ground, turning over rocks and dirt with increasing desperation. Logan knelt beside her and gently touched her shoulder. She whirled around, and he found himself looking into the most beautiful face he had ever seen, even twisted as it was with anguish. Her eyes were a striking shade of green, now red-rimmed and streaming with tears, and there was something about the way she looked at him, like a drowning person seeing a rope thrown into the water, that made his chest tighten. "It's gone," she gasped out, her voice hoarse from crying. "It's gone, and I cannot find it anywhere. I have looked and looked, but it is gone." "What's gone, madam? What are you looking for, my locket?" she said, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, leaving tracks through the dust that had settled on her face. "My mother's locket. It is the only thing I have left of her, the only thing, and I have lost it." Logan looked around at the expanse of dirt and rocks behind the store, at the scattered debris and wagon ruts that crisscrossed the area. The wind had been fierce that afternoon, kicking up dust devils and sending tumbleweeds rolling down the main street. Anything small could have been blown anywhere, could have rolled into any crevice or been buried under inches of shifting dust. "When did you last have it?" he asked, helping her to her feet. She swayed slightly, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "This morning," she whispered. "I know I had it this morning because I held it before I came to town. I rode in from my aunt's ranch about 5 miles north of here. I came to pick up supplies, and I went to several shops. I noticed it was missing maybe an hour ago, and I have been searching ever since." She looked up at him with those devastating green eyes. "Please, I know you do not know me, but please, if there is any way you could help me look." "I do not know what else to do." Logan should have said no. He had been on the trail for weeks and was exhausted, covered in grime, and desperate for a hot bath and a real bed. He should have offered her some polite words of sympathy and been on his way. But something about her, about the genuine devastation in her eyes and the way her voice broke when she mentioned her mother, made it impossible for him to walk away. "I will help you look," he said. "Tell me what it looks like." The relief that flooded her face was almost painful to witness. "Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. It is silver about this big." She held up her fingers to show him a circle about the size of a silver dollar, with a delicate filigree pattern on the front. Inside is a small portrait of my mother. The chain is silver as well, very fine, with a small clasp that has been loose for some time. I should have had it repaired, but I could never bear to part with it long enough. "What's your name, madam?" "Victoria," she said, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "Victoria Morgan." "My aunt is Ellen Morgan. She has the ranch north of town." "Logan Pierce," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I am pleased to meet you, Miss Morgan, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Now walk me through everywhere you went today." For the next several hours, as the sun began its descent toward the Sierra Nevada mountains in the west, Logan and Victoria retraced her steps through Genoa. They started at the boarding house where she had stopped for lunch, searching every inch of the dining room and the path leading up to it. The proprietress, a kind woman named Mrs. Henderson, helped them look, getting down on her hands and knees to peer under tables and furniture, but they found nothing. They moved on to the milliner's shop, where Victoria had admired some new ribbons but purchased nothing. The milliner let them search through the store, even going through her stock to make sure the locket had not gotten tangled in the merchandise. Again, nothing. At the general store, the owner, Mr. Patterson, remembered Victoria coming in that morning to order supplies for her aunt's ranch. He had not seen any locket, but he helped them search anyway, and even enlisted his 2 sons to scour the floorboards and the area around the counter. Still nothing. The apothecary, the land office where Victoria had dropped off some papers for her aunt, the gunsmith where she had picked up a repaired rifle, the feed store, the bank, every single place she had been that day yielded nothing. By the time the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Victoria looked ready to collapse. Her face was pale beneath the sunburn that had developed during their search, and she was trembling with exhaustion. "You need to rest," Logan said gently, "and eat something. You look like you are about to fall over." "I cannot rest," she protested, but her voice was weak. "I have to keep looking." "It will be dark soon," Logan pointed out. "We will not be able to see anything. Let me take you back to your aunt's ranch. You can rest tonight, and tomorrow I will come back and search some more." "You would do that?" Victoria asked, looking at him with wonder. "But you do not even know me. Why would you spend your time looking for my locket?" Logan was not entirely sure himself. There was something about her that had gotten under his skin from the moment he saw her, something beyond just her beauty. Maybe it was the genuine grief in her eyes, or the way she had looked at him with such desperate hope. Maybe it was because his own mother had died when he was young, and he still carried her Bible with him everywhere he went. He understood what it meant to cling to the few physical reminders of someone you loved. "Because it matters to you," he said simply. "And because I can see how much you are hurting. Come on, Miss Morgan. Let me take you home." The ride to the Morgan Ranch was quiet except for the sounds of the horses and the evening insects beginning their nightly chorus. Victoria rode on her own horse, a pretty chestnut mare, while Logan followed on his black gelding. She gave him directions in a voice that had gone flat and lifeless, so different from the desperate urgency of earlier. The Morgan Ranch was a modest but well-maintained property with a sturdy wooden house, a barn, a few outbuildings and corrals that held about a dozen horses. As they approached, an older woman came out onto the porch, her face creased with worry. "Victoria, thank goodness," she called out. "I was starting to worry. You were supposed to be back hours ago." Victoria dismounted slowly, moving like someone much older than her years. Logan dismounted as well and removed his hat respectfully as the older woman approached. "Aunt Ellen, this is Logan Pierce," Victoria said quietly. "He has been helping me search for something I lost in town." "Lost what?" Ellen asked, and then her eyes widened. "Oh no, Victoria, not your mother's locket." Victoria's face crumpled and she nodded, unable to speak. Ellen immediately pulled her into a fierce embrace, and Victoria finally broke down completely, sobbing into her aunt's shoulder with the abandon of a heartbroken child. Over Victoria's head, Ellen looked at Logan with eyes that were remarkably similar to her niece's, though faded with age. "Thank you for bringing her home, Mr. Pierce. Would you like to come in for supper? It is the least we can do after you helped Victoria search." "I would be obliged, madam," Logan said, because the truth was he was starving, and also because he wanted to learn more about Victoria and the locket that meant so much to her. Inside, the house was cozy and welcoming, with handmade quilts draped over the furniture and the smell of stew simmering on the stove. Ellen insisted that Victoria go wash up and change out of her dusty dress while she set the table. Logan washed up at the pump outside, scrubbing the worst of the trail dust from his hands and face. When they all sat down to eat, Victoria looked a bit more composed, though her eyes were still swollen and red. She had changed into a simple calico dress, and her hair was now neatly braided down her back. She picked at her food, clearly having no appetite, while Ellen and Logan made small talk about the ranch and the cattle business. "Victoria came to live with me about 6 months ago," Ellen said, glancing at her niece with concern, "after her father passed away back in Missouri." "I am sorry for your loss," Logan said to Victoria. "Thank you," she murmured. "He had been sick for a long time. The doctor said it was his heart." "My mother died when I was 12, also from a heart condition. After my father passed, there was nothing left for me in Missouri. The farm had to be sold to pay his debts, and Aunt Ellen was kind enough to invite me to come live with her." "Your mother was my younger sister," Ellen said softly. "Grace was her name. She was the most beautiful, gentle soul you could ever hope to meet. When she died, it nearly destroyed Victoria's father. He gave Victoria that locket when she turned 18, said it was time she had something of her mother's to carry with her always. That was only a year ago, just before he took ill." Logan looked at Victoria with new understanding. She was 19 years old, alone in the world except for her aunt, and had just lost the one tangible connection she had to her mother. No wonder she had been so devastated. "I will find it," Logan heard himself say. Both women looked at him in surprise. "I promise you, Miss Morgan, I will find your locket, even if I have to search every inch of this town." "Mr. Pierce, that is very kind, but you surely have your own business to attend to," Victoria said, though hope flickered in her eyes. "I just finished a cattle drive," Logan explained. "I have some wages in my pocket and no pressing obligations. I was planning to stay in Genoa for a while anyway, pick up some work at one of the local ranches maybe. I can spare the time to search for your locket." "Why?" Victoria asked, echoing her earlier question. "Why would you do this for me?" Logan met her eyes across the table. "Because I know what it is like to lose something precious. Because I can see how much it means to you. And because," he paused, surprised by his own honesty, "I cannot stand to see you hurting like this." Something shifted in Victoria's expression, a softening that made her even more beautiful. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know how I could ever repay such kindness." "No repayment necessary," Logan said. "I will start fresh in the morning. I will search every place you went again, more carefully this time. And I will expand the search to places you might have passed through without realizing you stopped." Ellen insisted that Logan stay in the spare room that night rather than pay for a room in town or sleep under the stars as he had planned. He accepted gratefully, and after supper, Victoria walked with him out to the porch while Ellen cleaned up inside. "I have been thinking," Victoria said, leaning against the porch railing and looking out at the darkening landscape. "The clasp on the locket chain has been loose for a while. It is possible it came undone and I never felt it fall, but it is also possible that someone found it and picked it up. If that is the case, they might think it is valuable and try to keep it or sell it." "That is a possibility," Logan admitted. "Tomorrow, after I search the obvious places again, I will start asking around. Someone might have seen it or heard about it. In a town this size, word travels fast." Victoria turned to look at him, her face illuminated by the lamplight spilling through the window. "Why are you really doing this, Mr. Pierce? And please be honest with me." Logan was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "When I saw you this afternoon, crying in the dirt, looking so lost and broken, something in me just responded. I felt like I had to help. And the more I have learned about you and what you have been through, the more I want to help. You have lost so much already. You should not have to lose this too, not if there is anything I can do to prevent it." "You are a very kind man," Victoria said softly. "I did not think there were many men like you left in the world." "There are more than you might think," Logan said. "We just do not always show ourselves." The next morning, Logan was up before dawn, eager to begin the search. Ellen made him a hearty breakfast while Victoria came down wearing riding clothes, her hair in a practical braid. "I am coming with you," she announced before he could protest. "It is my locket, and I should be part of the search." Logan knew better than to argue with a determined woman, and truthfully, he did not mind the company. They rode into town together as the sun was just beginning to light the eastern sky, turning the desert landscape into shades of pink and gold. Logan's plan was methodical. They would search every location Victoria had visited the day before, but this time they would be even more thorough. They would also search the paths between locations, the streets Victoria would have walked down, and any place the locket could have fallen or been blown by the wind. At the boarding house, they searched not just inside but all around the exterior of the building. Logan got down on his hands and knees and examined every crack in the floorboards of the porch, every crevice where a small object could have fallen. Mrs. Henderson brought them coffee and expressed her hope that they would find the locket. They moved on to the milliner's shop, then the general store. At each location, Logan searched with painstaking care, looking in places that seemed impossible but where a small locket on a broken chain might have ended up. He checked rain barrels, looked through gaps in boardwalks, examined the bases of hitching posts where something dropped could have rolled. By midday, they had searched 6 locations with no success. Victoria's initial hope was beginning to fade again, replaced by a resignation that hurt Logan to see. They stopped for lunch at the boarding house, and Logan used the opportunity to start asking questions. "Mrs. Henderson, did anyone come through here yesterday afternoon or evening talking about finding something? Maybe a piece of jewelry?" Mrs. Henderson thought for a moment. "Not that I recall, Mr. Pierce, but you might want to ask at the saloon." "The bartender there, Samuel, he hears all the gossip in town. If anyone found something valuable and mentioned it, he would likely know." After lunch, Logan and Victoria headed to the saloon. It was early enough that the establishment was not too busy, just a few men playing cards in the corner and a couple of drifters nursing drinks at the bar. The bartender, a tall man with graying hair and a friendly face, looked up as they entered. "Help you folks?" he asked. Logan explained the situation while the bartender listened carefully. "I did hear something yesterday evening," Samuel said slowly. "One of the miners who came through here was talking about seeing some young fellow examining something shiny behind the general store. Said it looked like the fellow picked up whatever it was and put it in his pocket. Did not think much of it at the time." Victoria gripped Logan's arm. "Did he say what the young fellow looked like?" "Tall, skinny, wearing a brown vest and a hat with a red band, if I recall correctly," Samuel said. "Sorry, I cannot tell you more than that. The miner did not seem to think it was important, just mentioned it in passing." Logan felt a surge of hope mixed with concern. If someone had found the locket and picked it up, they might still have it, but they also might have already sold it or left town. "Did the miner say which direction this young fellow went?" "Afraid not," Samuel said. "But you might want to check with Mr. Patterson at the general store. If this happened behind his place, he might have seen something." They hurried back to the general store, where Mr. Patterson was helping a customer. When he was free, Logan described what they had learned. Mr. Patterson's face brightened with recognition. "I do recall seeing a young man behind the store yesterday, now that you mention it," he said. "Skinny fellow, brown vest. I did not pay much attention at the time, but yes, he was back there for a minute or two. Could not tell you what he was doing, though." "You know who he is?" Victoria asked urgently. "Does he live in town?" Mr. Patterson shook his head. "Never seen him before. Might have been passing through or might work at one of the ranches outside town. You could ask around at the livery stable. If he had a horse, he would have stabled it there." The livery stable was their next stop. The owner, an older man named Charlie with a limp from an old injury, listened to their description and nodded. "Sounds like it might be Tommy Fletcher," Charlie said. "He is a ranch hand at the Double R Ranch, about 8 miles east of here. Young fellow, maybe 20 years old, skinny as a rail. He was in town yesterday, I remember, because he had trouble with his horse's shoe, and I had to help him fix it." "Is he still in town?" Logan asked. "No, he headed back to the ranch late yesterday afternoon," Charlie said. "But he comes into town most Saturdays if you want to wait and talk to him then." "Tomorrow is only Thursday," Victoria said, her voice tight with frustration. "I cannot wait that long. What if he has already sold the locket or lost it himself?" Logan made a decision. "Then we ride out to the Double R Ranch today. If this Tommy Fletcher has your locket, we need to get it back as soon as possible." The Double R Ranch was a large operation, much bigger than the Morgan place, with extensive cattle operations and a dozen or more ranch hands. Logan and Victoria rode up to the main house in the late afternoon, their horses tired from the journey. A foreman met them, a gruff man named Hank, who looked them over suspiciously. "We are looking for Tommy Fletcher," Logan said. "We were told he works here." "He does," Hank said. "What business do you have with him?" Logan explained about the lost locket, and Hank's expression softened slightly. "Tommy is out with the herd right now, but he should be back before dark. You are welcome to wait. I will send someone to let him know you are here." They waited in the shade of a large cottonwood tree near the house, their horses tethered nearby. Victoria was tense, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, barely speaking. Logan wished he could offer her more comfort, but he knew that until they actually had the locket in hand, any reassurance would ring hollow. As the sun was beginning to set, a group of ranch hands rode in, dusty and tired from a day's work. One of them was a tall, skinny young man wearing a brown vest and a hat with a red band. Logan stood up, and Victoria quickly followed. "Tommy Fletcher," Logan called out. The young man dismounted and approached them cautiously. He had a friendly face, open and honest, with freckles across his nose and bright blue eyes. "That is me. Hank said you folks wanted to talk to me. Did you find a locket yesterday in Genoa?" Victoria asked without preamble. "Behind the general store." Tommy's eyes widened and his hand instinctively went to his vest pocket. "I did," he said. "I was going to turn it in, I swear. I just wanted to make sure I gave it to the right person. How do I know it is yours?" "It is silver with a filigree pattern on the front," Victoria said quickly. "Inside is a portrait of a woman with dark hair and green eyes, wearing a blue dress. That is my mother. The chain is silver with a delicate clasp that has been loose for some time." Tommy reached into his pocket and pulled out the locket, holding it carefully in his palm. Even from a few feet away, Logan could see it was beautiful, the silver catching the dying light. Tommy opened it, looked at the portrait inside, then looked at Victoria. "You look like her," he said softly. "Same eyes." He held the locket out to Victoria. "Here, madam. I am glad I could return it to you." Victoria took the locket with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. She clutched it to her chest, her eyes closed, and for a moment she seemed unable to speak. Logan felt his own throat tighten at the sight of her relief and joy. "Thank you," Victoria finally managed to say to Tommy. "Thank you so much. I cannot tell you what this means to me." "No thanks needed, madam," Tommy said, looking pleased but also a bit embarrassed by her emotional reaction. "I am just glad I found it before someone less honest did. That is a beautiful locket, clearly precious to someone. I could not have lived with myself if I had not tried to return it." Logan reached out and shook Tommy's hand firmly. "You are a good man, Tommy Fletcher. Thank you for taking care of it." As they rode back toward the Morgan Ranch in the gathering darkness, Victoria held the locket clutched in one hand, occasionally opening it to look at her mother's portrait. Logan glanced over at her several times and saw tears still sliding down her cheeks, but now they were tears of relief and joy rather than grief. "I cannot believe you found it," she said finally. "I had almost given up hope, and you found it. You actually found it." "We found it," Logan corrected. "Together?" "No," Victoria said, looking at him with an intensity that made his heart beat faster. "You found it. You were the one who refused to give up, who kept searching, who tracked down every lead. You could have walked away yesterday when you first saw me. You could have offered a few kind words and gone about your business, but you did not. You stayed and you searched and you found my most precious possession." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Why, Logan? Please tell me the truth." Logan brought his horse to a stop, and Victoria did the same. They sat there in the middle of the road, the last light fading from the sky and the first stars beginning to appear overhead. "The truth is," Logan said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "from the moment I saw you yesterday, something changed in me. I know that sounds foolish. We have only just met. But there is something about you, Victoria, that has gotten into my heart. When I saw you crying, when I learned what you had lost and what it meant to you, I could not walk away. I did not want to walk away. I wanted to help you, to see you smile again, to be the one who brought you back something precious." Victoria was staring at him with those remarkable green eyes, and in the dim light, he could not quite read her expression. "Are you saying," she began tentatively, "that you have feelings for me?" "I am saying," Logan replied, "that in the span of one day you have become the most important person in my world. I am saying that I would have searched for 100 days if that is what it took to find your locket. I am saying that I think I might be falling in love with you, Victoria Morgan, and I know that is crazy and impossible after such a short time, but it is the truth." For a long moment, Victoria just looked at him, and Logan's heart hammered in his chest. He had laid himself bare, risked everything, and now all he could do was wait for her response. Then she smiled, a radiant smile that lit up her entire face, and Logan felt like the sun had risen in the middle of the night. "I thought I was the only one feeling this way," she said softly. "I thought I was mad. But from the moment you knelt down beside me in the dirt yesterday, from the moment you looked at me with such kindness and concern, I felt something too. And as we searched together, as I watched you refuse to give up, as I learned what a good and honorable man you are, those feelings grew stronger. I think I am falling in love with you too, Logan Pierce." Logan dismounted and moved to her horse, reaching up to help her down. When her feet touched the ground, she did not step away. Instead, she moved closer until they were standing so close he could feel the warmth of her body, could smell the faint scent of lavender in her hair. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes," she whispered. Logan cupped her face in his hands, marveling at the softness of her skin, and lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question being asked and answered. But then Victoria's arms came up around his neck, and the kiss deepened, became something more urgent and passionate. Logan felt like he was drowning in sensation, in the taste of her, the feel of her body pressed against his, the small sound she made in the back of her throat that drove him half wild. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Logan rested his forehead against hers. "I have never felt like this before," he admitted. "Never wanted someone so much, never cared about someone so deeply so quickly." "Neither have I," Victoria said. "It is terrifying and wonderful all at once." They stood there for a few more moments, just holding each other in the darkness before Logan reluctantly stepped back. "I should get you home before your aunt worries. But Victoria, I want to court you properly. I want to see where these feelings lead. Would you allow that?" "Yes," Victoria said immediately. "Yes, I would like that very much." When they arrived back at the Morgan Ranch, Ellen took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly. "I take it you found the locket," she said. Victoria held it up, the silver gleaming in the lamplight. "Logan found it. A ranch hand named Tommy Fletcher had picked it up and kept it safe. Logan tracked him down at the Double R Ranch." Ellen looked at Logan with approval and gratitude. "You are a man of your word, Mr. Pierce. You said you would find it, and you did. I cannot thank you enough." "It was my pleasure, madam," Logan said. "And if you do not mind, I would like to call on Victoria to court her properly." Ellen's smile widened. "I do not mind at all. In fact, I would be delighted. Victoria could use some happiness in her life, and it is clear that you make her happy." Over the following weeks, Logan became a regular presence at the Morgan Ranch. He found work at a nearby cattle operation, which gave him a steady income and a legitimate reason to be in the area. Every evening after work, he would ride to the Morgan place, and he and Victoria would spend hours talking, walking around the property, getting to know each other. Logan learned that Victoria loved to read, that she had a talent for singing though she was shy about it, that she wanted to learn how to really manage a ranch so she could help her aunt more effectively. She learned that Logan had been on his own since he was 16, that he had worked various jobs across the West, but had always dreamed of having his own land someday, that he had a quick wit and a kind heart beneath his rough exterior. They went on picnics in the hills, where Victoria would bring food and Logan would bring his harmonica and play for her. They rode together across the open range, racing their horses and laughing like children. They sat on the porch in the evenings and talked about their hopes and dreams while Ellen smiled from inside the house, pleased to see her niece so happy. One evening about 2 months after they met, Logan and Victoria were sitting by the creek that ran through the Morgan property, watching the water flow by and listening to the frogs sing their evening chorus. Victoria was wearing the locket as she did every day now, and she had gotten it repaired so the clasp was secure. "I have been thinking," Logan said, taking her hand in his, "about the future, about what I want from life." "And what do you want?" Victoria asked, lacing her fingers through his. "I want land of my own," Logan said. "Not a huge spread, just enough to run some cattle and horses, a place where I can build a house and put down roots. I have been drifting for so long and I am tired of it. I want a home." "That sounds wonderful," Victoria said softly. "The thing is," Logan continued, his heart pounding, "I do not want that home without you in it. Victoria, I know we have only known each other a few months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I want to marry you, to build a life with you. Would you consider being my wife?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Logan, I will marry you. I love you too so much. You brought joy back into my life when I thought I would never feel joy again. You gave me back my mother's locket, but more than that, you gave me back hope and happiness. I cannot imagine my life without you now." Logan pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, pouring all of his love and joy and relief into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, Victoria was laughing and crying at the same time, and Logan felt like the luckiest man alive. They were married in early October of 1872, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Genoa. Ellen stood up with Victoria, and Logan asked Charlie from the livery stable to stand up with him, having formed a friendship with the older man over the past months. Even Tommy Fletcher came to the wedding, happy to see the couple whose story he had become a small part of. Victoria wore a simple white dress that Ellen had helped her make, and she wore her mother's locket. Logan wore his best clothes, cleaned and pressed, and his hands shook slightly as he placed the ring on Victoria's finger. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, and told Logan he could kiss his bride, Logan did so with such tenderness and love that several of the women in attendance wiped away tears. Logan had saved every penny from his work over the past months, and combined with what Victoria had inherited from her father's estate after debts were paid, they had enough to purchase a small parcel of land about 3 miles from Ellen's ranch. It was not much, just 160 acres, but it had good water, decent grazing, and a nice spot for a house. That winter, with help from Ellen and some of the men from neighboring ranches, Logan built a house for his bride. It was small but sturdy, with 2 bedrooms, a main room with a fireplace, and a kitchen that Victoria immediately began to make her own. They moved in just before Christmas, and on their first night in their new home, they lay in bed and talked about the future. "I want children," Victoria said softly, her head resting on Logan's chest. "Lots of children. A house full of laughter and love." "Then we will have children," Logan promised, running his fingers through her hair. "And we will love them and raise them to be good people, and they will grow up knowing they are wanted and cherished." "Tell me again how you knew," Victoria said. "How you knew you loved me when we had only just met." Logan was quiet for a moment, thinking about that afternoon behind the general store, about the woman he had found crying in the dirt. "I think," he said slowly, "that when you meet the person you are meant to be with, your soul just knows. I saw you in your worst moment, broken and desperate, and instead of being repelled, I was drawn to you. I wanted to fix what was broken, to ease your pain, to be the reason you smiled again. And with every hour we spent searching, with every conversation we had, that certainty just grew stronger. You are the other half of my heart, Victoria. I think I knew that from the very beginning." "You are the other half of mine," Victoria whispered. "I look at this locket every day, and I am reminded not just of my mother, but of you. Of the man who refused to give up, who searched until he found what I had lost. You gave me back a piece of my past, but you also gave me a future. You gave me everything." Their first year of marriage was not easy. Ranching never was. There were cattle to tend, fences to mend, hay to cut, and 1,000 other tasks that filled their days from dawn until dusk. But they worked side by side, and the hard work only brought them closer together. They laughed together in the evenings, made love in the quiet of the night, and built a life that was rich in love even if it was modest in material wealth. In the spring of 1874, Victoria told Logan she was expecting their first child. Logan was overjoyed, though also terrified. He knew the dangers of childbirth, knew that women died bringing babies into the world. But Victoria was strong and healthy, and Ellen was there to help, having assisted with many births over the years. In November of 1874, Victoria gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him James, after Logan's father, and Logan cried the first time he held his son, overwhelmed by the love he felt for this tiny person, and by gratitude that Victoria had come through the birth safely. James was a happy baby, with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. Logan was a devoted father, staying up with Victoria during those long nights of feeding and diaper changes, rocking his son when the baby was fussy, singing to him in a deep voice that never failed to soothe. As James grew, the ranch prospered. Logan was a hard worker and a smart businessman, and slowly but surely they built up their herd and improved their property. Victoria proved to be just as capable a rancher as her husband, working alongside him in all aspects of the operation while also managing the household and raising their son. In 1876, Victoria gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Grace after Victoria's mother. Grace was a beautiful baby, with auburn hair like her mother's and a sunny disposition that brightened every day. Logan doted on his daughter, and Victoria loved watching her husband be gentle and tender with their little girl. 2 years later, their third child was born, another son they named Samuel. Samuel was a quieter baby than his siblings had been, but he had a thoughtful nature and a sweet smile that melted hearts. Their house was now full of the noise and chaos and joy of 3 young children, and Logan often thought back to that day he had promised Victoria a house full of laughter and love. They had achieved that and more. Ellen remained a constant presence in their lives, spending time with her great-niece and great-nephews, helping Victoria when the demands of motherhood and ranch life became overwhelming, and becoming like a mother to Logan, who had not had one for so long. On their 10th wedding anniversary in October of 1882, Logan and Victoria left the children with Ellen for the night and took a ride out to the creek where Logan had proposed. It was a beautiful autumn evening, the cottonwood trees turning gold and the air crisp, but not yet cold. "Do you remember the first time we came here together?" Logan asked, holding Victoria close as they sat on the bank. "Of course," Victoria said. "You told me you wanted a home and you asked me to be part of it." "Best decision I ever made," Logan said. "This life we have built, these children we are raising, this love we share, it is more than I ever dreamed possible." Victoria touched the locket at her throat, a gesture that had become unconscious over the years. "I still think about that day I lost this," she said, "about how devastated I was. But if I had not lost it, I might never have met you. You might have ridden right past Genoa and I would never have known you existed. In a strange way, losing the locket led me to you." "I prefer to think of it as fate," Logan said. "I think we were meant to find each other one way or another." The locket was just the universe's way of making sure it happened. "You think our children will find love like this someday?" Victoria asked. "The kind of love that consumes you, that makes everything else in the world fade away?" "I hope so," Logan said. "I hope they find partners who will search for them when they are lost, who will fight for them, who will love them with everything they have. I hope they find what we found." As the years passed, the Pierce Ranch continued to grow and prosper. Logan bought more land, expanded their herd, and built a reputation as an honest rancher and a fair employer. Victoria became known throughout the area as a kind woman who would help anyone in need, whether it was a neighbor who needed an extra hand during calving season or a family passing through who needed a meal and a place to rest. Their children grew up strong and healthy, learning the value of hard work and the importance of family. James grew into a tall, serious young man with a talent for working with horses. Grace was lively and spirited, with her mother's beauty and her father's determination. Samuel was the gentle one, always ready with a kind word or a helping hand. In 1885, Ellen passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72. Victoria grieved deeply for the aunt who had been her anchor after her parents died, who had given her a home and a new start. But she took comfort in the fact that Ellen had lived to see her great-niece happily married and settled, had known her great-great-nieces and great-great-nephews, and had died knowing that Victoria was loved and cared for. Ellen left her ranch to Victoria, and after much discussion, Logan and Victoria decided to combine the two properties. James, now nearly 12 years old, showed a strong interest in ranching, and they began to teach him the business in earnest, knowing that someday this land would be his to manage. As Victoria sorted through Ellen's belongings, she found a letter addressed to her. In it, Ellen had written about the day Logan had brought Victoria home, about how she had seen the way he looked at her niece and known immediately that he was the one. She wrote about how proud she was of the life Victoria had built, about how grateful she was that Victoria had found love and happiness after so much loss. Victoria cried as she read the letter, but they were tears of gratitude and love, not grief. In 1890, when James turned 16, a young woman named Sarah came to work as a hired hand on the Pierce ranch. She was the daughter of a rancher who had fallen on hard times, and she needed work to help support her family. Victoria was initially hesitant about hiring a young woman for such hard work, but Sarah proved to be as capable as any man, and she had a way with horses that impressed even Logan. Victoria watched with amusement as James became completely smitten with Sarah. She remembered what it was like to be young and falling in love, and she encouraged the budding romance, inviting Sarah to dinner frequently and making sure the two young people had opportunities to get to know each other. By the time James was 18, he and Sarah were inseparable. He came to Logan and Victoria and asked for their permission to marry her. Logan shook his son's hand and welcomed Sarah into the family, and Victoria hugged her future daughter-in-law and told her how happy she was that James had found someone special. James and Sarah were married in the spring of 1892, and they built a small house on the far side of the combined ranch property. Victoria cried at the wedding, remembering her own wedding 20 years earlier, remembering how young and full of hope she and Logan had been. They were older now, their hands weathered from years of hard work, their faces lined with age and experience, but the love between them was as strong as ever. Grace, now 17, was being courted by a young man from a neighboring ranch, a good-natured fellow named Thomas who clearly adored her. Samuel, at 14, showed no interest in romance yet, more focused on his books and on learning everything he could about the land and the animals. On a quiet evening in early 1893, Logan and Victoria sat on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. James and Sarah were at their own house, Grace was helping with dinner inside, and Samuel was reading by lamplight in his room. "Do you ever think about that day?" Victoria asked softly. "The day we met, all the time," Logan admitted. "I think about how close I came to just riding past, to not stopping when I heard you cry out. I think about how different my life would be if I had made that choice. I think about being in the dirt, feeling like my world had ended," Victoria said. "I thought losing that locket meant losing the last piece of my mother, the last connection I had to my family. But I was wrong. That locket was precious, and I still treasure it, but it was never about the locket itself. It was about what it represented, about love and family and connection. And you gave me all of that, Logan. You gave me a new family, a new home, a new life full of love." Logan took her hand, the gesture as natural and comfortable as breathing after so many years together. "You saved me too, you know. I was drifting, lost, not really living. I was just going through the motions, working and moving on and never putting down roots. You gave me a reason to stay, a reason to build something lasting. You gave me a home." "We gave each other a home," Victoria corrected gently. In Inside the locket that Victoria still wore every day, the portrait of her mother kept company now with other small treasures. Victoria had carefully added a tiny lock of hair from each of her children, so that Grace's memory lived alongside these new lives she had created. Sometimes Victoria would open the locket and look at her mother's portrait, and she would think about how proud Grace would have been of the woman Victoria had become, of the family she had built. In 1895, Grace married her sweetheart Thomas in a beautiful ceremony that brought together families from all over the region. Victoria and Logan stood together and watched their daughter pledge her life to someone she loved, and Victoria squeezed Logan's hand tight, remembering her own vows 23 years earlier. Samuel grew into a thoughtful young man with a love of learning that surprised everyone. When he turned 18 in 1896, he announced that he wanted to go to the state university to study agriculture and animal husbandry, so he could bring modern techniques back to the ranch. Logan and Victoria supported his decision, proud that their son wanted to improve and expand on what they had built. By 1900, Logan and Victoria were grandparents several times over. James and Sarah had 3 children, Grace and Thomas had 2, and their home was often filled with the laughter and chaos of grandchildren visiting. Logan, now in his 50s, had silver streaking through his dark hair, and Victoria's auburn hair was beginning to show threads of gray. But they were both still active and healthy, still working the ranch alongside their son and his family. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Logan surprised Victoria with a gift. He had commissioned a craftsman in Carson City to create a beautiful wooden box lined with velvet, specifically designed to hold the locket. On the inside of the lid, the craftsman had engraved the words for Victoria, who taught me what it means to love. October 1872. Victoria cried when she opened it, touched beyond words by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "You did not need to do this," she said, but Logan shook his head. "That locket brought us together," he said. "It deserves a special place, and someday when we are gone, our children and grandchildren will look at it and remember our story. They will remember that love is worth fighting for, worth searching for, worth every effort." As the new century dawned, the Pierce Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the area. Logan and Victoria had built something lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. But more important than the land or the cattle or the money was the family they had created, the love they had nurtured and protected through all the years. In 1905, Samuel returned from university with a degree and a wife, a smart young woman named Catherine who shared his love of learning. He brought new ideas and new techniques to the ranch, and Logan was happy to let his youngest son implement changes that would make the operation more efficient and profitable. Logan and Victoria began to slow down a bit, letting their sons take over more of the day-to-day operations while they focused on enjoying their grandchildren and each other. They took long walks together, rode out to the creek where they had shared so many important moments, and sat on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set. On a warm evening in June of 1907, 35 years after they had first met, Logan and Victoria sat on that same porch, surrounded by the sounds of their grandchildren playing in the yard and the smell of dinner cooking inside, where Grace had come to help prepare a special meal for her father's birthday. "I have been thinking," Victoria said, leaning her head on Logan's shoulder, "about everything we have been through. All the struggles and the joys, the losses and the victories. And I realize that every single moment, even the hard ones, brought us here. To this place, this life, this family." "No regrets?" Logan asked, though he knew the answer. "Not a single one," Victoria said firmly. Well, except maybe that I let the clasp on that locket go so long without being fixed. But then again, if it had been fixed, I might never have lost it and we might never have met. I would have found you somehow, Logan said with certainty. I believe that. Some things are just meant to be. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Victoria touched the locket at her throat, a gesture that, after all these years, had become as natural as breathing. Inside was the portrait of her mother, faded now with age but still clear enough to see the resemblance between Grace and Victoria. And now there were new faces to remember as well, new generations to cherish and protect. "Thank you," Victoria said softly. "For what?" Logan asked. "For searching," Victoria said. "For not giving up. For finding not just my locket, but for finding me. For seeing me at my worst moment and choosing to stay. For loving me all these years. For giving me this beautiful life." Logan turned to kiss her, a gentle kiss that held the tenderness of 35 years of marriage. "Thank you for letting me find you," he said. "For trusting me, for loving me back, for building this life with me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Victoria Pierce." As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Nevada sky, the family gathered inside for dinner. The table was crowded with children and grandchildren, with laughter and conversation, with the kind of warmth and love that made a house a home. Logan looked around at the faces of all these people he loved, all these lives that existed, because he had stopped to help a crying woman in the dirt 35 years ago, and his heart was full to overflowing. Victoria caught his eye across the table and smiled, that same radiant smile that had captured his heart all those years ago. She touched the locket at her throat, and he understood the message in that gesture. The locket represented her past, her mother's love, the family she had come from. But Logan represented her future, the family she had built, the love that had sustained her through all the years. In the end, both were precious beyond measure. Both were worth searching for, worth fighting for, worth treasuring. And both had brought her to this moment, surrounded by love, living a life richer and fuller than she had ever imagined possible. Years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growing family. In 1912, Logan and Victoria celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by 3 children, 9 grandchildren, and their first great-grandchild, James and Sarah's eldest son's baby daughter. The house they had built 40 years earlier had been expanded multiple times to accommodate family gatherings, and the ranch now encompassed several thousand acres. Logan was 70 now, his dark hair completely silver, his face deeply lined from years of working in the sun. But his dark eyes still lit up when he looked at Victoria, and he still held her hand every evening as they sat on the porch. Victoria was 60, her auburn hair now mostly gray, but still beautiful in Logan's eyes, still the woman who had captured his heart 4 decades earlier. They had faced challenges over the years, of course. There had been droughts that threatened the herd, harsh winters that tested their endurance, market crashes that affected cattle prices, illness and injury that reminded them of their mortality. But they had faced everything together, supporting each other, drawing strength from each other, never wavering in their commitment. One evening in late 1914, Logan was not feeling well. He had been having pains in his chest for a few days, though he had tried to hide it from Victoria. But she knew him too well, and she insisted on sending for the doctor from Genoa. The doctor examined Logan and took Victoria aside afterward. "His heart is weak," the doctor said gently. "There is not much I can do. He needs rest, no stress, and he needs to take things easy. How much time he has, I cannot say. Could be months, could be years. But you need to prepare yourself, Mrs. Pierce." Victoria felt like the ground had dropped out from under her. She had always known that someday one of them would have to face losing the other, but knowing and facing the reality were two different things. She thanked the doctor, paid him, and then went to sit with Logan. "I heard what he said," Logan told her, taking her hand. "I am sorry, Victoria. I am sorry I am going to leave you." "Do not talk like that," Victoria said fiercely, though tears were streaming down her face. "You are not going anywhere yet. We still have time." "However much time I have left, I want to spend it with you," Logan said. "Doing the things we love, being with our family, remembering all the good times we have had." And that was exactly what they did. James and Samuel took over all the ranch operations, and Logan and Victoria spent their days together, taking slow walks, sitting in the sun, talking about their life together. They looked through old photographs, told stories to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and held each other close at night. Victoria wore the locket every day, and sometimes Logan would reach out and touch it, remembering that day 42 years earlier when he had heard a woman crying and made the decision to stop and help. "Best thing I ever did," he would murmur, and Victoria would kiss him and agree. In March of 1915, Logan died peacefully in his sleep, with Victoria lying beside him, her head on his chest just as it had been on countless nights throughout their marriage. When she woke in the morning and realized he was gone, Victoria felt a pain in her heart so intense she thought it might kill her too. But she did not die. She lived because she had a family to take care of, grandchildren to love, and a legacy to protect. The funeral was one of the largest Genoa had ever seen. Logan had been respected throughout the region, known as a fair and honest man, a devoted husband and father, a hard worker who had built something lasting. People came from all over to pay their respects, to comfort Victoria and her family, to share stories of how Logan had helped them or inspired them. Victoria stood at the grave with her children around her, feeling like part of her had been buried with Logan. But she also felt his presence with her, felt his love surrounding her, knew that he would want her to be strong and to go on living. She touched the locket at her throat and made him a silent promise that she would honor his memory by continuing to love their family and protect what they had built together. The years that followed were difficult for Victoria. She missed Logan with an intensity that never faded, missed his voice and his laugh and his touch. But she found comfort in her family, in watching her grandchildren grow, in seeing her children continue the work she and Logan had started. She remained active in the ranch operations as much as she was able, offering advice and wisdom gained from decades of experience. On quiet evenings, Victoria would sit on the porch where she and Logan had spent so many hours, and she would open the locket and look at her mother's portrait. She would think about how Grace had died young, how Victoria had grieved for her for so many years. And she would think about how Logan had helped her heal from that grief, had shown her that it was possible to honor the past while still building a future. In 1920, Victoria's eldest grandchild, James and Sarah's son, got married. At the wedding reception, the young man asked his grandmother to tell the story of how she and Logan had met. Victoria had told this story many times over the years, but she never tired of it. As she spoke, describing that desperate afternoon when she had lost her mother's locket, describing the stranger who had stopped to help her, describing the days of searching and the moment when they finally found it, her voice was strong and clear. "Your grandfather was the best man I ever knew," she finished, looking around at all the faces of the family she and Logan had created. "He taught me that love is about more than just words or feelings. Love is action. Love is refusing to give up when things are hard. Love is searching through the dust and the dirt until you find what was lost. Love is showing up every single day and choosing each other over and over again. There was not a dry eye in the room, and afterward, several of the grandchildren came to hug Victoria and tell her how much they loved the story, how much they loved her and Logan's legacy. Victoria lived to be 82 years old, passing away peacefully in 1934, 19 years after Logan. In those 19 years, she had seen the ranch continue to prosper, had watched her grandchildren grow and have children of their own, had witnessed the world change in ways she never could have imagined when she was young. But through all the changes, the love she and Logan had shared remained constant, a light that continued to guide their family. When Victoria died, she was buried beside Logan on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together. Her children placed the locket in her hands, so that in death as in life, she could keep her mother's memory close. But before they closed the casket, James opened the locket one last time and added something new, a small photograph of Logan and Victoria on their wedding day, young and hopeful and so deeply in love. The Pierce Ranch continued for generations, passed down from parents to children, a legacy of hard work and love and commitment. And always, the story of how it all began was passed down as well. The story of a woman who lost something precious and a cowboy who searched until he found it. The story of two people who met in the worst of circumstances and built the best of lives. The story of a love that endured beyond death, beyond time, a love that became legend. In the house that Logan built, now over 60 years old but still standing strong, the wooden box he had commissioned for the locket sat in a place of honor. Inside was the locket, with the portrait of Grace and the photograph of Logan and Victoria. And on special occasions, when the family gathered to celebrate or remember, someone would take out the locket and tell the story again. The story of how Victoria lost her most precious possession and found something even more precious in return. The story of how Logan searched for days through dust and determination until he found not just a locket, but the love of his life. The story of two people who proved that sometimes the things we lose lead us to exactly where we are meant to be. And every time the story was told, the message was the same. Love is worth searching for. Love is worth fighting for. Love is worth every tear shed and every mile traveled and every moment of doubt overcome. Love, true love, the kind of love that Logan and Victoria shared, was the most precious thing in the world. Worth more than silver or gold, worth more than land or cattle, worth everything. That was the legacy they left behind, and it endured long after they were gone, carried forward in the hearts and lives of everyone they had touched.